You're an American citizen.
Yeah.
And you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California. How do you think that's going to vibe with most of you? You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen. There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on.
Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back in delivering another sharp critique of the Democratic Party, and watching it unfold is striking. When outspoken commentators like Smith or Bill Maher turn their scrutiny inward, it often signals that there are deeper challenges within the party. Smith's remarks highlighted what many see as key factors behind recent electoral setbacks, serving as a blunt reminder that dissatisfaction can come not just from opposition parties, but from within. His critique underscores the importance of addressing both messaging and policy issues if the Democrats hope to regain broader voter support. As always, make sure to subscribe to stay updated. Let's dive in. Here's the clip in question, followed by Stephen A.'s compelling response.
There were 2 officers who were facing lacerations on their face.
All for prosecution of those who pelted them?
Look, I've seen the videos of this snowball fight. I think that it was a snowball fight.
A snowball fight or assaulting cops?
I think it's a combination of both. They're law enforcement. They're not engaging in a snowball fight with you. They don't want to be bothered. If they're law enforcement and that's not something that they were entertaining, then assault would be the way to go. Now, obviously, if you just hit them with some sort of snowball or whatever the case may be, I mean, you didn't harm them or anything. That's entirely different. So there's different levels of assault. But nevertheless,
well, you're not harmed until you're harmed.
But nevertheless, exactly, the act is the act itself. And the law enforcement wasn't capitulating to that kind of situation. Then we have to take that into consideration. And if they felt it was assault, then damn it was assault, plain and simple. But once again, this is something that comes back to bite Mamdani because he wasn't considered the strongest supporter of the NYPD as he was running for office.
What began in that video as lighthearted fun quickly turned serious. Many New York City residents were simply enjoying the heavy snowfall, transforming the streets into a temporary winter playground. Laughter echoed, people dashed through snow-covered avenues, and snowballs flew, a rare moment of joy amid days of harsh weather. However, the tone changed when some individuals started targeting NYPD officers with snowballs. What had been playful energy crossed a line, especially after reports indicated that officers were injured. At that point, it was no longer just a spontaneous snowball fight. It had escalated into an incident requiring accountability. When Zoran Mamdani was asked if those responsible would face consequences, he downplayed the situation as just a snowball fight, a response that left many viewers stunned. Now, pay attention as Stephen A. Smith delivers his unfiltered take on the matter.
But once again, this is something that comes back to bite Mamdani because he wasn't considered the strongest supporter of the NYPD as he was running for office. When you listen to some of his rhetoric in the past, some of the things that he had said about the police didn't seem to be that keen on being supportive about them. I don't recall whether or not he was talking about defunding police, but I believe.
Oh yeah,
I believe he did say that.
I
believe he did say that. So because that's a reality. You know, when you see that kind of stuff, it sort of seems dismissive about concerns for law enforcement. And that is not a good position for him to be in, particularly when they're not getting raises or anything like that, because you don't have the money to take care of them, nor did you appear inclined to do so even if you did. So all of those things definitely work against him. And that's the kind of thing that can turn officers against you. And with all the problems that New Yorkers...
Stephen A. Smith cut straight to the core of the issue. During his campaign, Zoran Mamdani was outspoken about supporting measures to defund the police, which makes his casual characterization of the snowball incident as just a snowball fight particularly troubling. Critics argue that when officers are deliberately targeted and injuries occur, downplaying the event sends a concerning message about accountability and responsibility. Dismissing the situation so lightly can create the impression that hostility toward law enforcement is either acceptable or unworthy of attention. In a city already engaged in sensitive debates over public safety, statements from public figures carry real weight, shaping both perception and behavior. Stephen A. warns that this kind of rhetoric has consequences beyond a single episode. Today, it might involve snowballs thrown at NYPD officers. Tomorrow, similar attitudes could escalate into more serious incidents affecting public officials or the wider community. Once lines of accountability and respect are blurred, rebuilding trust and maintaining order becomes a much harder challenge for everyone involved.
See this AOC Mamdani video in Spanish?
Hola.
Mi español no es el mejor.
No te preocupes, alcalde. Si su hijo o hija está cumpliendo 3 o 4 años en el 2026, usted puede registrarlos gratis en el programa Kinder 3 o Pre-Kinder de la ciudad de Nueva York. Pero debe registrarse el 27 de febrero, que es la fecha límite. Cualquier padre de la familia de la ciudad de Nueva York, sin importar su ocupación, ingreso o estatus migratorio, es elegible para registrar a su
Child care for all, meaning illegals. So they are talking about illegals, number one. Now, we live in Miami. We're in Miami right now. I hear more Spanish than English outside of this studio basically all day long. So I don't have a problem with Spanish or Spanish speakers. However, speaking in another language while encouraging people who are not legal citizens to get city services, that seems a bit much for.
That's exactly the question many are asking. Where, if anywhere, are undocumented immigrants automatically entitled to unlimited free health care? Critics argue this isn't a minor policy debate, it's a serious challenge. The U.S. healthcare system already faces long wait times, rising costs, and stretched resources that affect citizens and legal residents alike. Expanding eligibility without clear limits or safeguards, they warn, could place additional pressure on an already fragile system. Opponents say this is the very scenario they've cautioned about for years. Policies that expand access without addressing sustainability, they argue, risk overburdening infrastructure that is struggling to meet existing demand. Concerns have been amplified amid ongoing debates over President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's border policies, which critics claim have contributed to escalating systemic strain. With figures like Zoran Mamdani and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez advocating for broader access, skeptics fear that without carefully planned solutions, public services could face even greater pressure, impacting both long-term sustainability and the quality of care available to all residents.
Not that. What I would tell you is that if you're trying to cater to that particular audience, speaking their language doesn't hurt. So that's not a crime. You know, they're voted. There are folks in the Hispanic community that are voting, and when you talk in their language, it makes them a bit more receptive to you in terms of wanting to listen to what you have to say. I mean, what parent doesn't want, free preschool for 3-4-year-olds, et cetera, et cetera. But I always harken back, and it's very important that I bring this up, because I remember when some people asked me, when you became so moderate, somewhat of a centrist per se, when did that happen for you? And I can't remember the year, but I remember when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were in office. And I never forget, as long as I live, a reporter was talking, Dick Cheney, former Vice President of the United States, God rest his soul, he was talking to him about the polls were showing blah, 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 blah. He looked at the report and said, "So?" And I was eating my cereal. I was like, what? What did he say? Because I had never seen it.
Stephen A. Smith argues that Zoran Mamdani should reconsider the aggressively progressive path he's been following and move closer to the political center. In Smith's view, doing so wouldn't be a sign of weakness. It would reflect awareness, adaptability, and strategic maturity. Of course, such a shift isn't without risk. The same progressive base that helped elevate Mamdani's profile could perceive a move toward the center as a betrayal or a watering down of core principles. Yet, Stephen A. emphasizes that effective leadership isn't about pleasing every faction in the short term, it's about building lasting credibility and broadening your coalition. By adopting a more measured, centrist approach, Mamdani could potentially resonate with moderates and independents, the very voters who often decide national elections. Beyond individual electoral prospects, a recalibration could strengthen the Democratic Party's chances heading into 2028, particularly among voters who have grown wary and are looking for steady, pragmatic leadership.
A vice president do that before. The president, he said, "So?" And then he said, "You didn't elect us to follow your lead. You elected us to lead, to do what we believe is in the best interest of this country." And that's exactly what we're doing. And then the reporter elaborated a little bit about something with Planned Parenthood and stuff like that. And she tried to accuse him of being against that. He said, "I'm not against that at all. I'm against you asking the government to pay for it. And all of a sudden, it opened my eyes and reminded me what all of this is really, really about. Most people in this country have a live and let live attitude. Live your life, etc., etc. So what's the uproar about?
People expect leaders to provide clarity, direction, and steady conviction, qualities that inspire confidence and give citizens something solid to follow. Critics argue, however, that the Democratic National Committee increasingly projects the opposite image. Instead of setting the agenda and framing the debate, the party often seems reactive, adjusting its stance in response to outside pressure rather than advancing a clearly defined vision and attempts to appeal broadly, especially to key minority constituencies. Detractors claim the party risks appearing more concerned with appeasement than principled leadership. When positions shift in reaction to the loudest voices of the moment, the party's messaging can come across as fragmented and inconsistent. Over time, this perception may erode public trust and create the impression that nearly any demand is negotiable, regardless of long-term consequences. Critics maintain that strong leadership requires balance, the ability to consider diverse perspectives while still upholding guiding principles that serve the broader electorate, not just select segments.
Is about the fact that you're going into the pockets of the American people and asking them to subsidize it. And when you do that, now you've got them up in a tizzy. Because you're saying this is where your taxpayer dollars is going to. And when that happens, all of a sudden that gives everybody the right to speak up and to say, wait a damn minute here. How is that possible? I know of a young lady that's a friend of mine that got in a car accident in LA. And literally needed to be treated, etc. And her bill was very, very exorbitant when she got treated at the emergency room and stuff like that. And she was trying to get on the phone, get some assistance, etc., etc. They literally told her, if you were a migrant, it would be easier to take care of you. But the problem is that you're an American citizen, so you have to wait in line.
For many taxpayers who have contributed to public programs over the years, the idea that others might receive similar, or even expanded, benefits without making comparable contributions can feel deeply unfair. It creates a perception that longtime supporters of the system are being sidelined while newcomers are prioritized. Even if that perception doesn't capture the full reality, it can still generate frustration and erode trust in leadership. Critics argue that this debate isn't about rejecting compassion, it's about striking a balance. Policies should be designed to avoid inadvertently marginalizing the citizens who have sustained these programs for years. When people feel overlooked in the very institutions they've helped fund, resentment can grow, deepening social divides and fueling skepticism about the priorities and fairness of government.
You're an American citizen, and you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California. How do you think that's going to vibe with most of...
Critics suggest that this dynamic helps explain why some Americans are drifting away from the Democratic Party. When voters feel ignored or believe that their long-term contributions are undervalued, frustration can build quickly. If those concerns aren't addressed meaningfully, they can influence decisions at the ballot box in future elections. For Democrats, the challenge extends beyond defending specific policies. It requires rebuilding trust with voters who feel disconnected from the party's current direction. Ignoring or dismissing these sentiments could carry tangible political consequences. Many Americans, critics argue, are signaling a waning patience, and if that perception continues, it may be clearly reflected in upcoming electoral outcomes.
I don't care what city you're in. I don't care what state you're in. Basically, what nation you're from. If you are a native of that country and you're being told you have to wait because they're favoring somebody who's not a native, who crossed the border illegally, you're going to have a problem with that, no matter who you are or where you're from. So understanding those kind of things is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about common sense.
Donald Trump built his political identity around the slogan, America First, a message that resonated with voters who felt overlooked by the traditional political establishment. Supporters frequently point to his hardline immigration policies, willingness to challenge long-standing international agreements, and assertive trade strategies as concrete examples of that commitment. From confronting China over trade disputes to prioritizing domestic industries in economic negotiations, Trump consistently positioned his decisions as defending American workers and protecting national sovereignty. For many of his backers, This clear, unapologetic focus on national interest remains a central and compelling feature of his political appeal.
You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen. There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on in our nation's.
Ultimately, the current political landscape highlights why frustration with the Democratic Party is growing. Many Americans feel their concerns are being sidelined in favor of policies that benefit undocumented immigrants or cater to special interest groups. From healthcare to law enforcement and other public services, citizens increasingly perceive a gap between what they contribute and what they receive, fueling resentment and mistrust. Progressive figures like Zoran Mamdani, with their ambitious policies and bold rhetoric, risk alienating moderate voters who feel left behind. Commentators such as Stephen A. Smith and Bill Maher have pointed out these inconsistencies, warning that ignoring the everyday concerns of Americans could carry serious long-term consequences, including potential electoral setbacks. At the same time, leaders like Donald Trump continue to attract support by emphasizing a clear America First approach, prioritizing the interests of citizens above all else. For many voters, effective leadership isn't just about ideology. It's about accountability, common sense decision-making, and putting people first. That wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.